The number one cause of mental illness under 25 is loneliness. The number one cause of death after 65 is loneliness. We are designed to actually connect.
Blair LaCourte is a dynamic business executive who, after being raised by two entrepreneurs, has taken a path less traveled.
Find what you love, find what you're good at, and find out where you can add value.
His career spans numerous industries such as entertainment, aviation, AI, technology, aerospace, consulting, investing, and military logistics.
The supercharger to relationships is when you connect to a person to the point that you believe they're compassionate to you. The secret that humans often believe is too simple is not just to care, but to take risk and believe and be vulnerable. And yes, sometimes you will get hurt, but the upside is so much bigger than the downside.
Renowned for his insatiable curiosity, collaborative spirit, passionate oratorical skills, and competitive drive, Blair consistently strives to make a positive contribution and impact in all his endeavors. Blair has held CEO or C-level strategy or operating roles in companies such as PRG, Sojet, TPG, Autodesk, Sun Microsystems, and in addition has taken several companies from startup to IPO such as AI Technologies and VerticalNet.
Humans need stress. Stress is actually a positive thing. All growth and learning is cognitive dissonance, which means you're making yourself think about something that forces you to have to grow, and it's painful.
Today, Blair is currently an astronaut in training for Virgin Galactic, where he expects to fly in 2026. He is as well co-founder and facilitator of a high-rated mastermind group of 60 global CEOs.
Talking about how people relate to each other is the most important thing in business.
And how we do that?
Well, most people would say that's
Hey Blair, welcome to the Nomad Solopreneur Show.
Hey Gabe, great to be here.
Great to have you. Your career spanned so many industries and you've been the executive of huge companies and now transitioning to a solo-founded coaching business. Why?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because although now I'm still surrounded by a lot of people when I'm working, I don't have anyone behind the scenes working with me. So it's been a pretty big adjustment. I think one of the things that you find when you get to bigger and bigger corporations is it may sound very sexy that you have a couple admins or that someone's driving you around, but really what's happening is that they're finding that you are most valuable in very narrow areas, like going to meetings and making decisions, and they're taking everything else away from you. So one thing I realized as I got to the point where I was going to transition out was I don't have any breath. So I'm very deep. I go give speeches. I talk to investors in a public company, and I make decisions. But I lost a lot of the fun of doing, meeting people, doing things, and not just being specialized. So I think sometimes when you're a solo entrepreneur, you think to yourself, oh, it would be great to be in a big company where I have all the support. Remember, when you're in a big company with all that support, they also niche you into doing very narrow things. So it's, six of this, half dozen another. But it's, so now I have different challenges.
Yeah, true. And speaking of specialization, how important it is, especially if you're a solo founder, is better to be a specialized person or a generalist?
There's a lot of research around strength-based management, right? Which says that, and there's actually a thing in Japanese. I'm gonna forget the name of it, Aikido, but find what you love, find what you're good at, and find out where you can add value. And strength-based management, which is Gallup Consulting, did huge studies over the last years. Find what you're good at and don't try to do everything for everybody. Find ways to leverage other people for the things you're not good at. I think that's the secret at a certain point. I think when you're younger, you want to try a lot of different things and you want to get exposed to them so you can understand what other people do. But as you get older, find those things that you are unique at and that you enjoy. And I would say that you will find ways to make up the other pieces. Now, there is a bunch of research that says that an entrepreneur or a solopreneur needs to at least do two things. One is they have to be a quick start, which means they have to be creative because they're always getting challenges. And the second is they have to be a fact finder, which means they can't run out of money. So they need to at least understand the numbers, right? Now, outside of those two things, you fit in what you love to do, you know. So I think you can, if you love being a generalist, be a generalist. But if you do have something that's your strength, don't hold back.
At the end of the day, we cannot be good at everything. And if we are good at those things that you mentioned and leverage other people knowledge for the others and expertise, that's a big thing. And I know that you're a big advocate of relationships in a business situation. How that help you across your career and as well, especially now when you're in the coaching business?
Sure. Well, I have, a strong opinion, being based, somewhat on anecdotal in my career, but I've also studied a lot about relationships, both from health and also if anyone out there has read anything around Dunbar's number, how many people you can connect to and what does that actually do to you? Humans are very, very different. Um, Now, every animal or most mammals have a parasympathetic nervous system, but they don't have a vagus nerve the way that humans do, where it attaches to the brain and the mouth biome, the stomach biome, all the organs. We are actually designed for connection. And when we don't get connection, it has a physical impact on our feeling of safety. And when that impacts your body, it actually reduces the efficiency of your immune system. So the number one cause of mental illness under 25 is loneliness. The number one cause of death after 65 is loneliness. We are designed to actually connect. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be an introvert or an extrovert, and you'll connect in different ways depending on who you are. It doesn't mean that you have to connect all the time, but it does mean that the way we feel safe is that we have a tribe, whether it's a tribe of 3 or it's a tribe of 50. We are designed for tribes. So if you're a solo entrepreneur, you have to be very careful to make sure that you connect outside of maybe just the work, or that you connect with the people that you serve, because once your system feels safe, your body will actually get stronger and stronger. And there's tons of research on it.
And what's a healthy connection? Since I always hear this thing that at the end of the day, all relationships are transactional. Is that true?
So it's funny you said that. I've been writing a book for a few years that I haven't finished it yet, and it's the working name of it was called Relevancy Rules. In essence, when you're not relevant to someone, a relationship will break at some point in time. There has to be some level of interconnection or relevancy. And I mentioned Dunbar, who was a psychologist and anthropologist, and wrote a bunch of research about 50 years ago, which has actually educated many, many organizational psychologists, which is how you connect to people. There's probably you have room for on average 150 people. How many are family? How many are friends? How many are acquaintances? How many are contacts? And how many are just recognizable? And the reason for that is that when you try to figure out if you're safe in the world, even someone who you see every day and just recognize them, don't know their name, can make you feel good if they smile at you. It doesn't necessarily have to be deep in every relationship. So the big thing about connection and relationship is it's an evergreen type of thing. If you would like to be connected to someone, the first thing you have to do is to actually smile at them. A lot of research says that if you smile at someone and they smile back, you get more back than you give from smiling, because the serotonin and dopamine hit that you get calms your body down and releases protective chemicals. So even little pieces of connection. Now, the strongest connection, and we in Dunbar would say that's in family or friends or best friends. The strongest connection is what we'll call a dyadic connection, a one-on-one connection with another person. And a lot of people say, yes, you need to have someone who cares about you. Harvard did that 80-year study that shows if you're married, you live longer, right? Now, you may live longer, but you may want to die. But there's a huge correlation between being in a relationship and how long you live. But there's different levels of it. The first level is, do you have someone who cares about you? But the second level, which I find fascinating, is, do you believe that someone is compassionate to you? And the reason that there's a difference between empathy and compassion is because empathy is, do you think that they care about you? I think they care about me. I think they like me, right? The compassion means that you believe in your heart that if something bad happens by deed or action, they will intervene. Now, okay, that makes sense. Now you believe not only do they care about you, but they're going to do something. But actually, you have to believe it subconsciously. And for most of us, we're still dealing with the trauma from our life. And so a lot of times we believe someone cares about us and we think that's good, but we don't let them in. We don't trust subconsciously. And therefore, we never get compassion. And that's the supercharger to relationships, is when you connect to a person to the point that you believe they're compassionate to you. That's the secret sauce. Now, um, how are you going to know if it's subconscious that you're dealing with it? You know by the externalities. You know around the edges, it seems like you're never getting to the next level, or you never feel calm about things, or you get very upset when something happens in a relationship. All those are signals that subconsciously you've been worried. Because if you really believe someone's compassionate, even if they make a mistake, which they will because they're human, and they do something that hurts your feelings, you don't actually freak out. You go and you communicate it and you talk about it. So there, the secret that that humans often believe is too simple is not just to care, but to take risk and believe and be vulnerable. And yes, sometimes you will get hurt, but the upside is so much bigger than the downside.
Yeah, absolutely, because we cannot survive in this world alone. And nurturing this relationship and getting rid of that veil that it's preventing us from being vulnerable and being open to allow that person to enter our world, it's so important. And you mentioned 150, a space for 150 connections. How do you are able to keep on top of things when it comes to maintaining those relationships? Even that, as you mentioned, there are different levels. But for example, like making sure that you're actually follow up and check in with others on a regular basis.
This is the trick to life, is that one person's connection is different than the other person's, what they need out of it, what they want. You said about transactional. If you love someone and you never get what you need back, I guarantee you will break. You can't just give. So part of the trick is to understand what you expect from people. And for certain people, you expect a little bit more. And for certain people, you need a little bit more, and you'll contact them more. There's in that whole segment of like, okay, I have 150 people. Sometimes people fall off your radar. You went to school with them, you haven't seen them in many years, but you see them. And the studies will show that if you see them and you actually meet them where you are today, and you just kind of a little cautious, and you're happy to see them, you hug them, but you don't experience the same feelings you did when you knew them before, then you won't. It will take a long time to get that close again. If you actually believe and remember things that you did together, and you let your brain accept them for who they were, you take a little bit of a chance, you can activate that node. That node was often very passive. You hadn't thought of them in many years, but you can bring it back to life. And for as long as you're there, the node feels like it's a very close node. And then when they leave again, because maybe they don't live there, you have to step back, but you have to appreciate that in the present time. So there's tricks, and the tricks aren't magic tricks. They're just the ability to allow yourself to have intimacy. There's 9 levels of intimacy, and when you're in a tribe, the reason that you have good and bad is that you have fear. And so fear makes you want to find someone that and someone that looks like you, and someone that won't hurt you, right? Another hardwired thing is social comparison. And you say, wait, that's obviously that's destructive, and it's not. Fear isn't destructive until you let fear rule you. Fear saves you. It signifies like, I'm nervous, I should pay attention. Social comparison as well was designed so if you're in a pack and you're the lowest one on the thing, you may get kicked out of the pack, or you may get killed. So knowing where you are in the pack allows you to decide if you need to work harder or you need to run faster and get up to the front of the pack. So both of those things are hardwired. The fear is to protect you from things from the outside that will hurt you. The social comparison is to look inside the pack and figure out if things inside the pack are going to hurt you. Now, if those are just signals, sensors to understand where you are any day, they're not destructive. But the way you offset those fears are on how you build relationships and how you actually create intimacy with inside your pack. And there's just a lot of different ways to do that, and there's no one good way for anyone. But I can tell you, if you don't feel like there's anyone out there that has compassion to you, then you're going to have a problem. And if you feel like I've had many people do this as I was writing the book, they'll take an audit, and I said, I want you to tell for a month, I want you to show me who you spend time with, and I'm going to keep track of who you spend time with. Then I want you to rank and rate how much you get from these people on 5 different bases, right? How much emotional safety do you get from? How much knowledge do you get from? How much community building do you get from? And you'll find that 50% of the people that you interact with the most, on average, those people are net negatives to you. Why? Because they want something from you, and they're taking more than you're getting. And you have to be conscious of that. When they say, people can drain you, people can drain you. That's not just a saying, it's that people will drain you. So find out which people give you energy. I'm not saying in the world you can't eliminate family members who maybe drain you, but you can limit your exposure. You can't eliminate everyone that you work with that drains you, but you can limit exposure. And being aware of your social and your connection, I don't think it's transactional to be able to balance yourself, and to know when you've given too much, or to know when someone isn't giving you anything. So you could call it, you're looking at the transaction, but in reality, I think it's much more positive than it is a negative. We use the words take on meanings. Transaction means no connection, and that it's done when you do it. And I think, humans are transactional sometimes, but most of the time we're not.
It's interesting because there are a lot of, especially on social media, a lot of this narrative that you have to give, and then take. And this can backfire massively based on what you said, because at the end of the day, if we just give, at some point, if we don't receive back, it's just that won't going to work, that relationship.
We wear ourselves out, and then we wear our body out in our immune system. And so let's actually dig a little bit deeper into that, what you just said, because I think that's interesting. If you give, and it's out of kindness, and you give, and the giving itself makes you feel good, that actually is not a negative trait. That's a positive trait. You've made the decision, you're in control, and you've given. If you give because someone is asking or needy and is pulling you, that becomes a stressful transaction for you. And I'm not saying you can't do it, because, we want to be good human beings, but there is a point when people will take more than you can give. And it's hard. The strongest people often don't ask for help. So by the time they really start to stress and they start to fall apart, people aren't used to looking at them that way. So it doesn't mean they're bad people. They just don't expect that you're going to crack. And they don't know how to help you because you've never asked for it before. So again, there's a concept that many of your viewers may know called the jury box. And it's really about self-awareness, right? And the jury box is just 4 boxes. And in the top left-hand corner, it's what you know about yourself and what others know about you. That's who you are in the world. Oh, I know Blair, and I know it about myself, and others know it. Now, in the jury box, if I took one over to the right, would be what I don't know about myself, but others do. So if I don't have good connections with them, no one's going to come to me and say, listen, do you realize that you're really irritating people when you do this thing? You're acting insecure. And I go, oh, my God, I was doing that subconsciously. I really need to think. So now all of a sudden, someone from the outside has helped me realize something about myself that made me more self-aware. The other vector going straight down is, I know something about myself, but I'm not going to share it with you because I'm afraid. I'm afraid you won't like me. I'm afraid you'll use it against me. And that's vulnerability. So when you expand your self-awareness, you can expand it in 2 ways. One is by people helping you. The other is by you helping other people understand you. Now, the bottom right box is the one that is, Buddhists, finding yourself. What I don't know about myself and others don't know about myself. So you say to yourself, well, how am I ever going to figure that? Other people don't know and I don't know. The way you figure that out is by interacting with people until you realize that, my God, I didn't realize this is who I was, but I now I do. And then you ask people about it and they help you. But this whole idea of expanding your self-awareness will give you more capability to connect with people in a safer way. Because the worst thing is to connect with someone and then something surprises you. And you shouldn't let things surprise you about yourself. You should be able to learn and say, okay, that's bad for me. I'm not going to hang out with that person. But a lot of times we stick in those relationships because we just don't understand what's causing it. The reality is, you have to be alone before you can be with anyone else. In mathematics, when you try to solve formulas, you can't solve two formulas at the same time. You have to set one and then you solve against it. So figure out who you are, watch what happens with other people and solve against it, and then keep expanding what you know about yourself. I think at the end of the day, while connection is the thing that makes us human, I think the connection to yourself is probably what our purpose is in life, is how to find out who we are. And, at some point I'll give you, I spent a lot of time with palliative care doctors talking about what people talked about when they died. And one of the biggest things they talk about is, was I my authentic self? Did I really actually do what I knew I wanted to do? Or did I do what society wanted me to do? And that's the one that is most disturbing, because they all know that it was totally under their control. The only reason they wouldn't have done it, they didn't admit that they were gay, or they didn't actually go travel when they wanted to, or they didn't take a chance starting a business. The only reason they didn't is because they were afraid. And again, fear can sometimes be, I didn't have enough money to do it, but there were other ways to do it. So again, we're it's funny, we're on a show talking about business, but in reality, business is just about people, right? Even when you look at selling, it's math combined with psychology.
Yeah,
I know what I want to sell. Here's what it's going to cost, but I got to figure out why people want it and how to communicate with them.
true, because if you don't really understand why they buy or why they need it, it's impossible to make it work.
Right. But I will tell you that the majority of people who sell things, they're good people, but they're thinking about how they like their product and why it's good. And they're not thinking about what it is. I mean, you're not buying a drill, you're buying a hole. You're not buying a hole, you're buying a screw that holds up a TV. You're not buying a TV, you're buying safety in your home so you can actually sit with your wife and watch it. That's the reason people, when you go down to why people buy, they buy for very, very simple reasons. And if you don't understand why they buy, then you have a problem, because you can't be an ethical business person if you don't understand why people buy. And I say that because if you really know they need it, then you should keep trying. And if you really know they don't need it, you should stop trying, right? Because it's not worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah, forcing someone to buy from you just because you have to, I don't know, make your cash flow work, that's sustainable. And at the beginning, I started as a freelancer. I found that the hard way. Like I just want to close that deal and so on. Even that I was coming from a very toxic environment. I used to work in sales, and that's pushy style of sales, like cold calling and so on. And I have that bad mindset. And once I really understand that, or they don't need a website. They need the outcome that website brings to them.
Right. And the website may be part of it, but it's not really what they want. It's a tool. And once you can connect to people at that level, that's where they start to trust you, because they think they feel seen. Right. And so I'm not saying that, this is simple, because remember, you have to be able to get close enough to understand who they are, and they have to let you see who they are.
And all starts there, right? I believe any type of business you try to put together, and especially when you're a solo founder, you have to be in the trenches to actually connect and talk to those individuals that you think they are your ideal client persona, and really understand the reason behind looking for a solution to the problem they have and the real problem, because often they think they have a certain problem, but at the end of the day, that's different. And I thought people come to me that, I need to get more clients. No, you actually don't. You need better clients.
Right. That's no, but that is, it's truth. Now let's bring this back to where we started around connection and health. There is also a negative in having too much connection. And when you're a solo entrepreneur and you're always out and you're always surrounded by people and you're always on, sometimes you just you come home and you just sit and don't want to interact with anyone because you've had too much. So you also have to be careful. Your strength is connection, but if you were an athlete and you ran for 10 hours straight and you didn't rest, at some point you become less efficient and then you get hurt, right? And you start running with a limp and then all of a sudden it causes another injury. And so your system starts to break down. And so, again, be careful that while connection is a superpower, too much connection is also poison, right? And that means you have to be taking care of yourself.
And how we do that?
For me, I think it comes down to that if self-awareness is the base of learning, then frameworks and models are the way that you fine tune it. And so you have to take a look at how do I feel and what did I do that caused me to feel this way? And you have to decide, I'm not going to go out on Friday nights because although I want to go have fun, I need to wait till Saturday night to go out because first I need to be alone because then I'm going to be better with my friends than if I try to go out, because I try to go out and I'm tired. So what do? I drink. And then if I drink, while we're having fun, it's not actually the healthy fun because I'm deteriorating my body as I'm doing it to stay awake and to be activated. So I think you have to try things. And say, how's it working? How am I feeling? How you're feeling.
Yeah, funny enough, I started something yesterday to literally write down after a task that I do or an activity that I do, how that felt to me. Because I'm in a whole process of rethinking what I actually want from life and from business and so on. And just labeling the feelings and labeling the way we interact with our day-to-day activities can lead there. And this, you mentioned rest and you mentioned recharging especially after connecting with a lot of people in different environments. How do we avoid that in a world that we are so connected? Of course, we can limit our social media intake. We can put our phone on airplane mode or all those type of things. But sometimes our brain just don't allow that. Like, I'll just reply to this friend or I'll just reply to that client and so on.
Right. Well, this is back to, social comparison and competitiveness. We're taught in a lot of cultures and in business that we have to be on, and the harder we work, the better we'll do. And other people are working and I need to do this. So these are inputs that are coming from the outside. They're important inputs. Like I said, social comparisons was there because if you're screwing up, you may get fired. You need to know how you're doing. But on the other hand, if you actually, look at this as if you were an athlete, you'd say, I will take a break after I do that sprint, because humans need stress. They need stress. Like stress is actually a positive thing. All growth and learning is cognitive dissonance, which means you're making yourself think about something that forces you to have to grow. And it's painful, but then you can't be growing all the time. When you build muscle, when you lift weights, you have to rip muscle. It causes stress and then muscle grows. So we're designed to want stress at some form every day to keep growing. On the other hand, if you've ever seen someone who lifts weights too much and doesn't take a day off in between, they don't make progress because their body can't actually heal, or they're not getting enough sleep. You'll find that they're not growing and they're not getting stronger. They're just literally burning out. And so I think that it's not so much that stress is bad. It's that we don't actually consciously think about recovery the same way we think about work. We don't say to ourselves, oh my God, I have to go take a hot bath. I have to cuddle this morning. One of the strongest things that you can do if you're married or you're in a relationship is the 10 minutes after you wake up to actually spend time just cuddling. Now, I know that sounds like, oh, trying to be, like socially correct, but it's actually very powerful. And the reason is that in between the time you sleep, and you get most of your deep sleep in the first 2 hours, and you get your REM sleep just before you wake up, which is repairing your brain. If you can transition from REM sleep um, to actually waking up where you're cuddling and you have skin to skin and you're not stressing out, you actually give yourself a huge advantage in how your body reacts to the new day. And so that's called recovery. So do you spend the time? When I was younger, I would be like, I got to get up. I got to get up. The alarm went off. I'm going to get ahead of the day. If I get ahead of the day, I'm going to win. Right. And in reality, sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And those are the things we have to be conscious about, because at least in Western society, we never talk about how well I rested today.
And it's interesting because, for example, now I'm on the eastern side of the world and currently in Thailand. And before this, I was in Indonesia, and seeing how they live life and seeing how less stressed they are comparing to us in the West, it's just unbelievable. And of course, it's also part of the culture and religion and so on. But they are not, of course, with some exception, they are not rushing as we do. And I remember first time visiting my home country, which is Romania, after I spent 9 months in Asia. I got stressed out in the first minutes after I landed because everyone was pushing, everyone was rushing to get to immigration. Everyone was like running against the clock, and it's insane. And to your point with cuddling, I had a perfect example. During the weekdays, I usually wake up before my wife and go into my routine and start as soon as possible doing things. But during weekends, I take my time, we cuddle, and spend time together in the morning. And even that sometimes I still do some sort of work during weekends, I feel more energized and more productive simply because I spend that time, college time in the morning with her, and it makes so much difference. So I can stand by that as well. And speaking of business, I like to pivot a bit discussion towards how you transition from and what were the characteristics and the skills that you hone into being an executive in some of the biggest companies in the world, in pivoting towards coaching and working with other successful CEOs.
Yeah, I think what I realized is that now a little bit, this is self-fulfilling prophecy. The way I led was more like a coach. Um, and maybe sometimes you grow up poor and you don't think you're smart enough. Sometimes you have a chip on your shoulder. So you go, oh, I'm not smart enough. So I have to have other people help me. I think maybe I started that way, but what I realized is that my dad had said something to me. I got in a fight with one of my best friends and we were arguing, and we're very good arguers. Like I was arguing my case, he was arguing his case, and we were going back and forth. And then we started to get really frustrated with each other. And he pulled me aside and he said, look, at the end of the day, you don't have to be right. You just have to get it right. You have to be right. You have to get it right, not be right. So if he actually was right, and I saw in your eyes, his point was better than your point. Why didn't you just say at that moment in time, hey, you know what? You're right. I didn't get that. And then build on that and go further, because you will go further when you actually work with other people to get there. It's good to have an opinion, because if you don't have an opinion, they can't tell you why you're wrong. And if you don't have an opinion, you can't prove to them why you're right. So yes, you should have an opinion. But at the end of the day, the goal should be to get the better answer, not the goal should be to win. And, as I went into bigger and bigger companies, what I realized is that as smart as I could be, I would never be smarter than the 10 people or 20 people who reported to me, or 1,000 people who reported to me. So it's all about activating other people and getting as much information. I said earlier to you, the problem with being specialized at the top is they keep you in meetings. I became very good at listening and then consolidating the information and making decisions. Maybe too good, but I really believe that what I was doing before is no different than what I'm doing now. I just do it in a different framework. Back then, I had explicit power. You report to me. So I'm really trying to make you feel more comfortable. When people report to you and you have a big job, your biggest issue is not to show them that you're the boss. Your biggest issue is to show them that they can actually teach you something. Now, when you're a coach to individuals and you don't have a big title and they don't report to you, you have to use implicit power. So implicit power is I have to show them that I'm smart enough to actually help them. It's a different side of a coin. Sometimes you use explicit power and you try to mellow it out. Sometimes you use implicit power and you try to ramp it up a little bit. And another phrase my dad would always use is, look, when you're coaching someone, you can help them up, but you can't hold them up. If you do too much for them and you hold them up all the time and you give them the answer, the second you're not there and you let go of them, their legs aren't strong, they'll fall down again anyway. If you help them up and let them stumble a little bit until their legs get strong, you won't have to help them up as many times because they won't fall down as many times. So I think it's a reframing. We get set in these patterns about what we should do, what we're supposed to do in business. And sometimes we're not self-aware of what we're good at. And we think that we have to do it a certain way. And, I don't think there's one type of leadership. I think that there's many different types of leadership. There's best practices, but it's tough. I like reading biographies more than I like reading books on leadership. I like the story, right? And then you pick up the leadership. You pick up how they used whatever circumstance they had to lead in the way that they could lead best. Whereas leadership books try to narrow it down and normalize it and give you it's probably true, but it's only true for 1% of the people because I've taken all the different things and brought them into an average. Right. On average, it's great that you compensate people, when they win. But in certain businesses, that's not why they're there. It's not the monetary compensation. So that's a great rule of thumb, but that may not be what's actually going to drive them. So you have to, every time you go into a business and into a team, you need to decide, what's the best way to help.
That's interesting because it's so tough nowadays. I will say to not only build the right team, and even as a solo entrepreneur, you usually work with contractors and other people that you need to oversee and make sure that everything works in the way they should. And that empowerment, like to not micromanage, to not stay on top of them to a degree that they feel they don't bring anything of value to the table or they are not useful and so on. That's a thin line. And personally, I found that I learned it on the hard way on my skin because I was a free control and micromanaging and so on. And of course, I lose important talent that way until I told myself, I'm not the best at everything. Like they are way more smarter and way more better than me on all those skills and so on. And I see this as a big challenge for a lot of people that I work with as a consultant, and how we can be better at it, how we can let go control and empower people to do what they're supposed to do and best at.
So I'll give you maybe a non-traditional answer. The way that you cannot micromanage is you have to be willing to fire people. You have to be willing to fire people because if you really are a single entrepreneur and you have to leverage other people on your team because you can't do everything, then you doing everything means that you're failing. And if you're failing, there's only two reasons that you're failing. One is that you are purposely trying to micromanage people who are already good. And if you gave them more space, they'd show it to you. The other is you're micromanaging because this client's important to you and these people aren't doing a good job and you're going to lose your client. And so you're trying to get them to do a better job. So what I would tell you is you have to find people that are smarter than you, and then you have to give them space and you have to fire people who aren't because everybody's not going to cut it. And if you're worried about losing your client and you have to micromanage someone who isn't good enough, then that's a problem. you will fail ultimately, even though you're trying to do something that's to help you not fail in the short run. You'll fail in the long run. People have a hard time just admitting maybe that person isn't good enough, and it's going to be a hassle to find someone new. But I've got to do it now because it's easier now than it will be later. And or it's a unique situation, and I don't want to do this. But you can't feel guilty about that. You're a captain of a team. You're a coach. Sometimes you pull the players off the field. We seem to have a very, very difficult time um, restructuring. And I think if you do it consciously and ethically and with integrity, every time in any company I've ever been in, if I fired a direct report or if I was involved in one of my direct reports firing one of their direct reports, I offered the person that I fired an hour lunch and I would tell them why this happened and what my opinion was, with the goal of saying, this is what I saw. And this is what I think you have to think about. If it's true, you need to find another thing to do because this isn't what you're good at, or you're not actually, you need to, find a way to be better at certain things. And well, most people would say that's torture, and it was really hard. For years now, people have come back to me and said, that's the first time someone was really honest with me. And I disagree with you, but I'm gone and proved you wrong, but I got this job and I did this. Or I disagree with you at the beginning, but I realized that maybe you're right. I picked a different type of job and I've succeeded. Now I've come back. I've gotten more references for people to come work for me, or more deals from people that I had let go. Because if you treat them with respect, they may not always agree with you, but they understand where you're coming from, and respect matters, right?
Because leading with honesty and respect, it's unfortunately not a common thing nowadays, and especially in big corporations. Like, I'm talking with people that got let go from their jobs and without any explanations and stuff like that.
I think that's a crime. I mean, it's a crime because I know where people are saying, look, I don't have time. If I did that with everyone, I don't have time. If you don't have time as a human to actually empathize and feel and explain with people, even if they're going to disagree with you, then you shouldn't be a leader,
Exactly.
right? Because you can't just deal with people when things are going right. And by the way, you may have made a mistake, and if you spend time with them later on, that you may realize I made a mistake. It's a two-way street. I'm not saying that management always makes the right decisions, um, and over time, you may decide that yes, I had to do it because it was the right decision from a corporate policy standpoint, but I don't agree with it, and this isn't the kind of corporation I want to be in.
Yeah, true. And you mentioned there's something when things don't go right. Like, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome in your career? And in the first place, why that happened?
Yeah, I have a phrase I always say to people who work for me, and it's look, the world isn't a fair place, right? And there's not always justice, and things are hard. Um, so sometimes you're learning, and sometimes you're earning. Sometimes unfair things are happening. You're not making a lot of money, and you should be, but you're learning. And sometimes you're getting lucky. Sometimes you're just lucky. You're in the right place. Your last job put you in this place, and you made money. It's great to be doing both at the same time. So when you ask about challenges, there's a major challenge every year of my life because I have to be honest with myself. Am I being as good as I can? I mean, I think probably one of the worst things is I've never really been fired. That tells me that I haven't taken enough risks, or I work too hard. Um, and I mean that, like, should be pushing the envelope to the point where there are points in time when, someone will come down and say, you need to go. And this is why. But, I, there's been a lot of times when I've failed, but I've always taken the failure as a learning opportunity. So I don't store them as failures. I store them as, what did I learn from that? I made a mistake, or I did this, or I did that. Um, and now I've learned from it, and I'll be better the next time. So it's a reframing of those type of did that, um, and now I've learned from it. Now, on paper, you can make anything look good because you didn't show the pain that it took to get there. My last company, that when I was a public CEO, we went public at $1.5 billion. It was an amazing experience. We turned over 100 times to investors, but within 2 years, the market went down, and there was nothing I could do. When we were tied to Tesla, and Tesla went down 70%, we went down 70%. I could look at that as a failure. I don't, because I think that I did the best I could, and I think I did it with integrity. And yes, I'm sorry that if you didn't sell and the market went down, you may have lost money, and I feel responsible for doing my best, but my best was my best, right? So was it a failure? Yeah. I lost a lot of money because I didn't sell any stock, because I thought it would be the wrong thing as for a CEO to sell his own stock when he believed in the people. But I will even add one other thing. Either you're learning or you're earning, but you just can't burn. Because if you burn out, then you stop playing. We're playing a sport, right? So as long as I keep playing, good news, bad news, who's to say, right? Different things lead to different things. And different learnings lead to a different person coming out the other ends. Until you stop playing, until you burn yourself out, then you really have lost, right? So just be careful.
True, and I know it's cliche, but this is not a sprint, and that's often that happens, that we imagine that, well, we have to win now, we have to do something now in order to be successful, but we have time and we have to play a long time game. And speaking of that, like when it comes to making important decisions, since instant gratification is everywhere nowadays and it's fed to our brain by all the social media and so on, how we can delay gratification by making the right decisions?
I think you said the important thing is, how do we make the right decisions? I mean, I use two paradigms. One is, what decisions do I have to make today? What decisions do I have to make this week? Or what decisions do I have to make in the next 6 months? So I play optionality. I try to get as much information as I can. I don't make the decision any earlier than I feel comfortable to make it. I don't feel bad if I put it off, because I know I'm going to make it, and I know I can do that. The second is something that I learned from the Israeli military, which is called the rule of seven, which is when you have a very tough decision, they would take 7 people and put them in a room, and 4 people would argue for whatever they thought they were going to do, and 3 people would argue against it. And just hearing the opposite arguments, just like a debate, actually makes you feel more comfortable that at least I know what the downside risks are. It doesn't mean I didn't make the wrong decision, but I made it with intent. I understood that this could happen, and unfortunately it did, but I didn't just actually ignore it. And that way you can learn. You figure out what did I miss in that, or did I just get unlucky? If every athlete was depressed every time that they had a bad play, we'd have no great athletes. Right? You just, and I do think you can sprint and then you have to recover. You see the soccer players, they sprint down the field, but then, they try to catch their breath, right? And they find ways to recover, and then they sprint down the field. So it's a long game, but there are definitely sprints. And the question for you is, at this moment, is this the time to sprint? You're going to use energy. Is this the time to sprint? Now, I always love Rafael Nadal because he would go after every ball, right? And I always thought, oh my God, he's nuts, right? But, at the end of the day, his was a level of intimidation that going after every ball, he didn't remember the last point. I flipped the coin for him one time, and I asked him, give me one tip. And he said, every point is a game. So he ran, and then that was over. Whatever pain was there, if he got it and missed, he just went on to the next point. And each point was a new point. And I think that you have to remember what happened in the point, but you can't take the emotion or the pain or.
And it's something interesting about him, because I follow all these 3 great careers, him, Djokovic, and Federer. And looking at Djokovic, how he managed his athleticism and energy down the years, it's so different than Nadal. Even that, I think they're almost the same age or 1 year between them. Nadal starts to crumble down right now. Probably one of the reason might be exactly that one, that he was basically not able to keep on playing at that intensive level compared to Nadal, compared to Djokovic, and Djokovic is still playing and still competing. But speaking of athleticism,
Right. And it's two different ways to look at, what life was and what life is. And Nadal, I think, is authentic. I think that's the way he plays. And I think Djokovic is authentic. I think that's the way he's playing. I look at Djokovic and, I met him early on and he was very difficult to like. Not because I think he was a bad person, but because he just was very difficult to attach to. Right. And, you look at Federer, who was standoffish, but you could attach to him in the elegance of how he did things. Right. Djokovic was just hard to fathom. As he got older, I realized his strength and how you attach to him he was always optimizing and trying to figure out how to be better, but he did it from a holistic standpoint, certain diets or certain training regimes. Whereas Nadal would play every game to the hilt, and Federer would train harder than anyone else. They just had different ways to do it, and they all made each other better, and that's why we loved it. That's why we loved it. And the other thing is that you know we talk about the psychology of happiness and joy. One of the things that can play both ways is inconsistent reinforcement is how people torture each other. You never know when someone's going to yell at you. You never know when someone's going to, take something away from you. That's it breaks you down. Inconsistent reinforcement on the upside means that people surprise you. And so you can't believe they did that. When that happens and it's a positive interaction, you get 10 times the dopamine and 10 times the serotonin. And that's why we love them, because they would surprise us, right? And it wasn't just, automatic. And sometimes they'd beat each other and not beat each other. It was always, you were just waiting to see what would happen. It was always exciting. And humans love that. It gives us 10 times the bonus when we see something amazing happen.
exactly, and I think the unexpected scenario, it's unbelievable. And speaking of unexpected, probably you dream how it will be. I know you're training to become astronaut for Virgin Galactic to travel in space in a few years. First of all, how hard is that? Second, do you imagine yourself already being there flying?
Yeah, it's the good thing about Virgin Galactic, and I've been with it since the beginning, is the idea was that we wanted to get people into space because there's a thing called the overview effect, where if you talk to almost every astronaut, now it's not everyone because the people are psychologically different, but almost every astronaut will tell you that they came back very different than they went up. And people have tried to figure out what this overview, is. Is it like taking mushrooms where your brain conceptualize in a different way? And it just changes because you think about things differently, because you're watching the earth from the sky and you can see how fragile it is. Is it that you're separating yourself from the magnetic forces so that you get a chance to expose? Is it that you're on the edge of blackness and you can see the difference between life and blackness? No one really knows exactly why, but everyone comes back differently. And when Richard first started Virgin Galactic and we were talking about this was one of the big things. If we can get people to experience looking at the earth from space, then they'll cherish the earth more and they'll come back and they'll be advocates. So unlike some of the other things where it's all about going into space, for a lot of us that helped get this thing started and signed up early, it was really about being proponents for how do we make a difference in this world, whether it's climate, whether it's wars, whether it's other things. And so, the journey has been as impactful as the time I go up. I had a chance to go up about 6 months ago, and I would let one of my friends go instead because we did something that no one thought could be done. We built a spaceship. We were the first into space for commercial space launch. We've changed people's lives, and we've added a tremendous amount of information into aviation and aeronautics on what you can do. A lot of the planes that are coming out today are benefiting from what we're doing. So I'm excited about it. I trained hard for it when I thought I was going up 7 years ago and 5 years ago. I'm ready to go, but we're really sitting in the back. I mean, we can do one experiment if we want, but in reality, we're up there to have the experience, not necessarily to, we don't have a job, right? So, I've done the everything. I'm ready to go. I've done the weightlessness. I've done the G-force training, and the biggest thing now is just mental, so that you don't waste the time you have up there. Because the first time you do something, sometimes you don't appreciate it because you're so amped up. So a lot of times what we do is, it's the visualization. I go watch the launches, I think about it, and I get ready for it because I really want to be calm when I go up. And, the people I've met through the program are just amazing. But I hate to say that cliche. It's been a great journey. Even if I didn't go up, because I'm going to go up now, I would have told you that it changed my life.
Yeah, true. And it's fascinating. Speaking of journey, can't wait to follow your journey to see how that unfolds and check in with you to ask you how it was. And speaking of that, where people can follow your journey, connect with you, or work with you?
Sure. My coaching group, you can check out. We post videos on our website. We have some great speakers, friends from over the years. They come, I give them a little money for their charity, and they're nice enough to come speak for me for a discount. It's called PPE Mastermind, And if there's anything I can help anyone with, that they see something on LinkedIn, then, you can go to LinkedIn, and if I can do something for you in less than 5 minutes, I'm 100% there, right? If there's a question I can answer or a connection I can make. But back to guarding how much time you spend doing different things, I limit how much I can do for others. I love to help, but the chances are I can't spend a couple hours.
Yeah, good point. Because at the end of the day, we have to start with us, and if we help us, we can help others even better. And I'll put the links in the show notes as well. And I want to conclude with a short challenge that you can give those listening or watching. They can apply in less than 1 week in order to become better leaders.
Right. I think that what you could do in 1 week is to in that 1 week is to watch everyone you interact with, and then go back and actually analyze why you interacted with them, how you interacted with them, and what you would do differently. Because we move so quickly, sometimes we don't think about it. You're going to find a couple of patterns. One pattern you're going to find is that you didn't realize who you really interacted with during the week until you looked at it. The second pattern you're going to find is what you really enjoy.
Love that. And that's an exercise that I'll do definitely myself as well, because I felt like I put on the back burner this interest.
Thank you for having me. And I appreciated the talk. We talked early on about how we wanted to talk about business. And I think, honestly, talking about how people relate to each other is the most important thing in business. So I enjoyed the talk.
You, yes, you're one of the few that stick to the end. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing so. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so below. And if you got any value from this, please share it with a friend. They might got some value from it as well. Thank you so much, and until next week, pura vida!